Hi, welcome back to our devlog. This week we are going to give you a quick progress update on what we've been working on, and then we're going to dive into another feature of our game. This time, the logic behind our animation gameplay system. We have been working on implementing the character equipment system and the procedural level generation system. Now, the level generation system is functional, but there's not a lot of content yet that we can show you. But the character customization and equipment system on the other side is already fully functional in terms of gameplay as well as visually. But do keep in mind that the user interface, on the other hand, is still in the prototype phase, so expect it to change drastically. As you can see, you're able now to equip and unequip items, and your character mesh will update accordingly. Now, for this week's topic, we're going to dive into the logic behind animations. For any action RPG, it's necessary to have good-looking animations, but that's not all. You also need to implement the logic behind them to make the gameplay feel nice as well. This week we're going to dive into how you can make your good-looking animations and turn them into nice feeling animations where the gameplay follows the visuals of the animation and it feels satisfying and rewarding as well. And we're going to show you the tools that we used for Song of the Tides to get a nice feeling to the combat. So to tell the system how it should handle the character animations, we are using an animation blueprint with the state machine. The animation blueprint has two parts. The first one is the event graph, which is functionally identical like the event graph in a normal blueprint. In our case, we mainly use it to retrieve and send information from the actual character blueprint itself. And then the second part is the anim graph. And in our case, most of the logic happens inside of a state machine. So you can see there's like a couple of things happening here. But if I double click on the state machine, this is where all the magic happens. And inside the state machine, you have states. These are states. And then you have conditions, which are these little arrows. So the conditions, as the name implies, direct what is necessary for the system to switch from one state to another state. So for example, the idle state, in our case, also involves the running and walking animation. So it's blending a couple of animations based on variable inputs inside here. And then once one of the outgoing arrow conditions are met, it will transition into another animation. So in this case, to go into the light attack state, we can double click on this arrow here and see the condition is that the light attack variable is true. And if it is, it will go in here and play this animation. Quite simple. Usually it will continue staying in the state. If the animation is looping, it will loop the animation forever, and it will stay in the state until a condition to switch to another state has been met. So in this case, it could be transitioning to the next animation, or it could be transitioning back to the idle animation if there's no additional inputs. Alright, so this is the animation editor, and I'm going to quickly go over the different anim notifies and animation curves that we have added to the system. So first, the animation notifies. There are two. The first one is the attack sound. This plays an attack sound. It's not like an impact sound, but more like a whoosh of the weapon swinging through the air. And then we have an anim notify called clear objects, and what this one does is basically when you are attacking and your weapon overlaps the enemy, it can only damage them once. Because if you... And then the enemy is basically stored in a list where like this enemy cannot be damaged by this attack again. But some attacks have multiple swings, like some animations have multiple swings, in the animation, so we need a way to tell the system that, okay, enemies, like the same enemies, can be damaged by this animation again, and that's what this clear objects notifies for. So in this case, there's only one swing, but we have this in here anyway. Next, for the animation curves. So the first curve is called can cancel, and this basically tells the system when the next animation can be played. So if there's like no input at all, the animation will just finish like this. But if there's any input, like a movement or a dodge or a triggering of the next attack, then from this point forwards, the next attack or next animation can start playing. Next up, we have cause damage. So as the name implies, this one actually directs when this animation, like when the sword overlapping with the enemy, actually will do damage. So if during the wind-up of the animation, my sword overlaps with the enemy, nothing will happen. Only if it overlaps with the enemy during this period, actual damage will be dealt to the enemy. Next one is the clash window. This basically makes you immune to stun or staggering. Right now, this is kind of like a work in progress system. It works fine, but having the player or enemy be completely immune to stun is not always ideal. For example, if there's a big boss that attacks the player, even during this animation, you should still be knocked back because the force is so strong. So we'll have to implement some kind of poise system like in Dark Souls, where this will give you an enhanced resistance to being stunned, but not complete immunity. The next one is tracking. So this basically tells the system if the character is rotating to face the locked on enemy. This can be really powerful, and if this was 1 the whole time, so it would be tracking the whole time, it would be completely impossible to dodge sideways, because as long as you're still in range, the enemy attacking you will rotate to face you. So this is why eventually the tracking stops, so that players can dodge, or enemies can dodge sideways to avoid the attack. Next up, stagger time. So this is just a flat curve, because currently there's no way to just store like a variable or a value in an animation. So the only way that this is possible is through an animation curve. So in this case, stagger time says, like, tells the system how long an enemy will be stunned if he is hit by this attack. Next one is can queue. So this basically tells the system when the next input can be registered. During this phase, no other animations can be triggered during the wind-up, but once this phase enters, where the can queue value is 1, you can start putting in your next commands, like queuing up the next attack, and the system will register it. And the last one is called cloth fix. And basically what this does is it reduces the impact of the cloth simulation, because if there's no adjustment to the cloth simulation, it will tend to do some goofy stuff. Like this, you can see the cape is falling over the character's head, which is realistic. That's what would happen if you have a cape like this and you perform a move like that. But of course, for our purposes, that's not really what we want. We would like the cape to remain somewhere on the back. So that's what this system is for. It keeps the cape and any other cloth a little bit more in place, so it doesn't go crazy during the animation. This is some footage of the old animation system where we didn't have that fix implemented, and you can see how during most of the attacks the cape is clearly falling over the player's head. And we implemented the cloth fix curve to adjust exactly that. Here you can see the new system in action instead.